Oh my god, hey! Welcome back to my Stagey YouTube channel. If you are meeting me for the first time, hello! My name is Mickey Joe and I am obsessed with all things theatre. I'm also an independent theatre critic and a content creator based here in the UK, and this is my theatre-themed YouTube channel where I post all sorts of theatre-themed content, largely reviews of shows that I have been invited to go and see. And this evening, where is my programme? Where is it? Oh, I was invited to the Old Vic Theatre in London to go and see Sylvia. So this is a new musical. It was seen at the Old Vic back in 2018. It had a run there that was plagued with cast indisposition and sort of creative challenges that ended up being reclassified as a workshop presentation, but it has now come back in a triumphant return of the full finished product. I didn't get to see it in its previous incarnation, so I was very excited to see it this time around, and there's certainly a lot of buzz around this production, and I'm going to be telling you all about it today in my full review vlog. As I sit down to film this, I feel like I could be here for a little while because there is so much to talk about. If you enjoy today's video, make sure to subscribe to my channel and go and check out some of the other reviews that I have posted recently. I have been to see so many exciting shows, and maybe it will help you decide what you want to go and see in the West End. Also, if you have been enjoying my content and you're already subscribed and you would like to be able to see my videos before everyone else, as well as getting access to some exclusive content, you can always become one of my channel members. For just £2.99 a month, you get access to all sorts of extra videos, including my First Impressions series, where I give a candid and unedited review as soon as I leave the theatre, which I post as soon as possible after each show. And you can just click on the link in the description to sign up for that. And the other link underneath that in the description is to make a free account with ShowScore. If you sign up using that link, you'll automatically be following me as a reviewer on that site. You'll see all of the written reviews that I've done for different publications like whatsonstage.com and Broadway World. And you can also use the website to score and review shows that you've seen in New York or London. Now, let's talk about... I still can't find the programme. Oh gosh, here it is. Let's talk about Sylvia. Now, I've mentioned that this musical has been seen at the Old Vic before, and when it was first staged, it was hot on the heels of Hamilton's opening in the West End, and it invited a lot of comparison between the two. It felt like one of the various attempts that there have been to create the UK's answer to Hamilton. You know, it's this one-word title, musicalising the life of a historical figure with a diverse cast, playing these historically white characters, and telling the story using contemporary music. And all of that is true. So this is about Sylvia Pankhurst, the daughter of famous suffragette Emmeline Pankhurst, one of her daughters, who is also a famous figure within historical feminism in her own right. More on that later. And much like Hamilton, it uses contemporary music, it uses hip-hop, and it uses all sorts of other exciting music styles that I do not know that much about because I am a musical theatre nerd, but I do find them very rich in theatrical potency, so that was exciting. And I mentioned diverse casting. Really what this is it's recasting a lot of historically white fictional characters like Winston Churchill, like the Pankhurst family, with black actors specifically. It's not clear what they're trying to evoke with that because you have some characters that are still played by white actors and others who aren't. And it's not that it's just a completely colourblind diverse cast because it's not really inclusive of Asian performers. We just have predominantly white and black performers. So I'm not really sure what the intention of that casting has been. I like that it's diverse, but I feel like it could be even more inclusive. So while Hamilton focuses on obviously the American Revolution and the early days of US independence, this focuses on the women's suffrage movement in the very early 20th century. And Emmeline Pankhurst is one of the most famous names associated with this movement, but in this musical we are focusing instead on her daughter, Sylvia. Now, they broadly wanted the same things, but also had a lot of conflicting ideologies. And that is largely what this musical explores. It follows Sylvia's life and her relationships and her relationship towards her family and her political beliefs. She was far more socialist, and she wanted their feminism to be inclusive of the working classes, and Emmeline Pankhurst didn't particularly. She was advocating largely for the wealthy women of the time, such as herself, rather than sort of looking to everyone else who also needed her support. Sylvia wanted them to ally themselves with the then emerging Labour Party and these socialist ideals, and that became a source of tremendous conflict within the Pankhurst family. But much like Hamilton, the story takes place over a series of decades, and it follows all of these different political decisions and these votes coming through and these marches and these events that became turning points in this conversation and in the battle for the right for women to vote in the United Kingdom. So that hopefully has given you a sense of what this musical is about, but was it done successfully? So I had concerns going into this, I'll be honest. After everything that I'd heard about that first run and then hearing a few snippets of songs, I wasn't sure how much of a finished, cohesive product this was going to be. And I'm quite happy to say that it was a lot more polished than I had feared it might be. I still don't know if I could go as far as to say I loved it. I didn't hate it. It was much stronger than I had worried, but there are still limitations. I mean, what it is still very powerful, very uplifting. I think a lot of people are really going to love this. It's going to inspire people. People are going to be cheering for this. A lot of people are going to be very seen from all sorts of different communities, I think. It has this energy that feels vital and riotous, and there's some really profound talent on the stage and some stunning creative choices. But for all of those, there are just these little drawbacks throughout that prevented me from connecting emotionally with what should have been some of the most powerful moments of the show, and connecting even with all of these characters, because I think for all of the development that they get, they are also limited by other creative choices. So I want to kind of walk you through the best parts of this show and the issues that come with each of those. We're doing pros and cons in this review, basically. And as I sit here, I've been teetering between a 3 and a 4-star review, but I do think on the strength of the overall presentation and the performances that it is a 4-star piece of theatre. It's not a 5. It couldn't be a 5 just because of how emotionally inaccessible I found it. And I really wanted to get on board with this story, and I love other shows that do similar things. But let's talk about why that was. So my favourite thing about this, I think, has to have been the staging. It was directed and choreographed by Kate Prince, who has this very distinctive style. Kate also co-wrote the book for the show with a collaborator named Priya Palmer. And Kate is also credited for the lyrics. And it's the staging and choreography specifically that is so incredibly striking. The way that they use movement and dance throughout as storytelling, even in the background, just to have this very large ensemble of other performers just complementing the scenes that are happening. And it's really, really satisfying to watch. Their movement is empowering and emboldening. The way that the misogynistic critics of the suffrage movement are choreographed is comical and obnoxious, and it's just the perfect use of dance and choreography to characterize these individuals in the way it wants you to understand and meet them as an audience. The Pankhursts are strong and resolute and emboldened and uplifted and triumphant. And yet we see moments as well that demonstrate their fragility and the way that certain historical events are portrayed, such as Black Friday, such as the Epsom Derby, which you can Google if you don't know about them. But rather than have them literally unfolding on stage with a tremendous amount of violence, it's striking the way that they are suggested. I'd say that as far as the staging goes, there are 3 incredibly powerful moments within the show. The first is at the end of Act 1, where we see the Black Friday police brutality taking place. It's incredibly familiar of the recent Sarah Everard vigil, and it's one of the defining emotive moments of the show, and an image that I think will really stay with people. My only issue with it is we see these victims of violence and we don't really see what the consequence is, because we go straight to an interval and then we don't really talk about that after we come back for the second act. Another incredible piece of choreography is when Sylvia and some of her peers have been jailed. They get imprisoned various times for their anarchic support of the women's suffrage movement, and because they are sustaining a hunger strike, they are subsequently force-fed. And the way that this is staged, incredibly strong visuals, but my issue with it is they keep singing, and Sylvia, the character, keeps singing and narrating while this is happening to her, and she says, like, I can hear them getting closer, and then they come to me, and then it happens to me, but I just try and fight my way through it. And because she doesn't stop talking about it retrospectively, we feel it retrospectively. We don't feel like it's happening in the present. We know that she gets past it, and I think the show doesn't value silence enough. If we just had that visual happening with some stark silence or something that makes it much harder to endure, it would be more of a gut punch. I wanted to feel something more in that moment, because I've seen another show recently that depicted the same thing, and it was a lot more harrowing for being a lot more sparsely staged. This ought to have been a lot stronger, but the lyrics and just the fact that there was singing and rapping happening over the top of it, I think separated me from it emotionally. A similar thing happened in the second act. I don't want to spoil this too much for you. I mean, it's one of the more famous events of the women's suffrage movement, but there's a particular scene that's recreated, and the visuals of it, perfect. The way that it's staged, incredible, and it should be absolutely devastating to watch, but the music over the top doesn't complement that, or something with the lighting. I don't think all of the creative elements have come together in a unified way to make you feel as devastated as you really ought to. Let's talk about the characters in this show. So we have Emmeline Pankhurst and her daughter Sylvia. And the two of them are billed, as you will see, side by side, starring in the production. Beverley Knight is obviously a very big star. Sharon Rose has just finished starring in Hamilton as Eliza. And yet, it really is all about Sylvia. I was expecting a lot more Emmeline Pankhurst in this, and we don't get her very much. And when we do encounter her, we don't really get to hear her perspective. I think it assumes a lot of what we already know about Emmeline Pankhurst, and we arrive with the women's suffrage movement having already begun. We don't see the beginnings of it. We talk about the death of Sylvia's father, Emmeline Pankhurst's husband, and the significance that that has had in their lives, and we talk about their motivations, but I just wish we had more of their feelings. Generally, I think my criticism with a lot of the lyrics in this musical would be that people sing their actions rather than their feelings, or people sing their immediate emotional response, but nothing more complex. I just think we need more people's ideological backstories. We need to understand why it is that you feel this way so that we can get on board with you as a character, because they do have these very different perspectives, Sylvia and Emmeline, and I want us to understand the motivations behind those. I really wish Emmeline Pankhurst had a song in the middle of the first act, maybe, where, as an aside, we hear her singing about her motivations and what it is that she wants to achieve and why she thinks that's important. If she's going to be painted as this villainous character who is unsympathetic towards the neediest in society, unlike her daughter Sylvia, and she's going to take such an opposite stance to Sylvia and they're going to become so far apart, I wish we could get her backstory. If she's going to be a villain, give her the villain song to justify all of this. I think one of the best things that Hamilton does is to have Burr as one of its principal protagonists and show it all from his perspective. And I think similarly, if we had more of Emmeline Pankhurst in the story, who is this complex and challenging character, it would be more satisfying, because Sylvia is not a complex and challenging character. She is presented to us as this morally upright heroine, and these are never the most interesting characters to explore. She has some grey areas. She spends much of the show conducting an affair with a married man who is far older than her. But we meet this as a love story that we're meant to readily jump on board with, even though she first came to know him when she was a very young child, which is a little bit creepy, but it's certainly not presented to us in that way. It's in a very affectionate song, which was slightly odd. And she just isn't the most compelling protagonist. Throughout, I would say we're not really delivered a strong enough reason for why Sylvia is the protagonist of this story? Is it meant to be like, you know, Emmeline Pankhurst, but now you're going to get to know Sylvia, in which case that needs to be the framing at the beginning, starting with Emmeline rather than starting with Sylvia? Is it that we're trying to make a statement on intersectional feminism by platforming Sylvia instead of Emmeline Pankhurst? I just think the way that the story begins and the way that it concludes with this very strange, very abrupt ending doesn't answer these questions. I was left wondering why. Why Sylvia? When the ending happens, it feels completely out of nowhere because there's so much unresolved for both Sylvia and Emmeline in terms of their relationship with each other and also the trajectories of both of their characters. So even if we just had an epilogue talking about Sylvia's impact, talking about what would go on to happen, talking about if they would ever reconnect, or if what we just saw was the last time they were ever going to speak to each other, these are questions that linger, and I think it would do well to answer them. Going back to Hamilton as an example, I hate to keep comparing it, but it does invite comparison. The way that they frame the story tells us immediately Hamilton is underrepresented in American history, and we're going to get to know more about him. And in that first number, you find out so much of the details of his life. We don't get that much detail in the entirety of the musical of Sylvia. And at the end of Hamilton, you have this lovely epilogue thing where Eliza is singing about his legacy, and that feels like something that's missing from Sylvia as well. Generally, I think because we don't have a narrator, we're missing a lot of this. When a new character is introduced, they have to spend a decent amount of time telling us about their stance and about their thoughts, and we still can't learn as much about them as Hamilton can tell us in a very quick introduction from a narrator character like we have in Aaron Burr. So while they may have been trying to separate themselves from Hamilton to avoid looking completely similar, because there are stylistic similarities throughout, both in the choreography and in the music, that are just inescapable, I do feel like they've suffered by not having someone fulfill that same kind of a role. Now let's talk about the cast who are playing these characters. So we have Sharon Rose as Sylvia. She does a lovely job, she sings beautifully, she shows determination and commitment, and she is passionate and fiery and soft when she needs to be, and she ages believably throughout the show. It's a really strong performance from her, but somehow Beverley Knight as Emmeline Pankhurst still gets the showier role, even though she has considerably less material. I feel like Sylvia is one of these thankless roles that is just at the heart of things and endures an enormous amount of exhausting material and is on stage for almost the entire show, but she is still always the daughter of. She still always feels secondary to Emmeline Pankhurst, who is just given such status whenever she is on stage, and Beverley Knight plays her astonishingly well. I mean, the vocals that she delivers are world class. Beverley Knight reminding you with this performance, she is one of the most sensational vocalists that we have in the UK and worldwide. An incredible voice that was made for theatre. But this is also one of my favourite performances that she has given, because she gets to play this matriarch, and she is regal and imperious and cold and ferocious when she needs to be. When she uses her full force, you feel it in every single seat of the theatre. The power that she commands on that stage is palpable. To that end, my personal highlight of the show was a song in the second act. I don't know exactly what it was called. I don't think I have a song list here, but it's the one that they have been previewing with a little clip when she sings, "I'd hoped, Sylvia, I'd hoped." That is a phenomenal number simply because of Beverley Knight's delivery. When she fully tears into her daughter, it's brutal but so incredibly compelling. And it's what you've kind of been waiting for the entire show, this clash of ideologies. I almost wish that it had been foreshadowed by them having a duet earlier in the first act. I don't want to keep going back to Hamilton, but kind of like a Dear Theodosia moment where they can sing about what they both want, and you can see the similarities between them even though they can't see it in each other. Because the song that I've been referring to, the one that I really enjoyed in the second act, it starts as Emmeline trying to comfort her daughter, and then it turns into this criticism. And I wish they were two separate songs. I wish that the criticism was a reprise of the comfort song. Going back to the cast, I'm not going to have time to talk about all of these performances, but Alex Gaumond plays a character called Keir Hardy. He has a lovely tenor voice still. Oh my gosh, some of those notes that Alex Gaumond was hitting. But he brings a lovely measured quality to the proceedings, and he grounds it in a lot of sincerity as well. Verity Blythe plays Clementine Churchill, the wife of Winston Churchill. She's a really fun character, but not nearly as fun as Winston Churchill's mother, who just about steals every single scene that she is in. Her name is Lady Jenny Churchill, and she is played by a performer called Jade Hackett, who is sensational. Oh my gosh, possibly the standout performer of this show and the standout moments of this show, because it's such a distinctive shift when Winston Churchill's mother comes on. She gets this beautifully anachronistic song. I don't know enough about contemporary music styles to tell you what the style of her song is, but it's so incredibly satisfying. And it's just fun, and it's just ridiculous, and it's this tongue-in-cheek anachronism of Winston Churchill's mother bringing all of this sass and energy as she criticises the suffragette movement and declares that women don't need the right to vote, and tells her son how he's going to behave. She's wonderful, and it's so much fun that you then feel subsequently like there could be more of that same kind of fun and wit throughout the rest of the show. I think even though we're doing something historical and epic and important and dark and sad in many places, that we could still infuse it with a little bit more buoyancy and fun where we have the chance. Jay Perry played Winston Churchill. I really enjoyed his performance as well. I felt like he was underdeveloped as a character because there's so much we could say about Churchill and his opinions during this time, and he was just sort of portrayed as a leaf in the breeze who was going to do whatever he was told by either his mother or his wife, whoever happened to be louder at that moment. And he didn't seem like a man who had much agency of his own. And when we're telling this important female story, then perhaps that's how we want to depict him. But I just think we don't really see pre-World War II Churchill explored in media nearly as much as we see him during wartime. So I'd be really interested to see his early political career characterized a little more interestingly. He was much more of an independent political force than he was portrayed to be in this. And I don't mean that he has to be portrayed favourably either. I think there are parts of him historically that aren't being talked about because he's remembered as this hero of the British wartime. But there are certainly things you could say about his attitudes. And he is, throughout this, the principal opponent to the women's suffrage movement. So I think that could have been fleshed out a lot more rather than him just being susceptible to the women in his life. Some other thoughts that are just now occurring to me. I know I mentioned the lyrics before, but there are parts where they are a little bit pedestrian and just a little bit on the nose. And people will sing things like, "This is happening, and now I'm sad, and now we're going to go to there." And I just want a little bit more nuance. I want a little bit more imagery rather than singing the most obvious lyric. I feel that sometimes in the storytelling as well. I feel like other musicals represent when something negative happens, when a character dies, in more sophisticated ways. We literally have a moment in the second act of Sylvia where somebody walks on with newspapers and is like, "Extra, extra, read all about it. This character's dead now." And there's another part where people are singing a letter to explain the context of where they have gone and why they are now leaving the plot. It's just all a little bit forced and on the nose, and I would like some subtler storytelling. I do want to talk about the design. Oh my gosh, I haven't mentioned this yet. I really enjoyed the costume design. So Ben Stones did the set and the costume design. The set, simple, effective, it sort of creates this amphitheatre. It suggests debate, which is very clever. We see it framed. There's a lot of references to artistry and painting, and Sylvia Pankhurst was an artist, so I like that they're referencing that. But the costume design, oh my gosh, they're in black and white throughout, and then you have these red touches to represent the Labour Party. We first see that when Alex Gaumond's character, who is the leader of the Labour Party, arrives, and he has this red scarf and these red socks. It's incredibly striking and noticeable, and then we see it creeping in more and more as Sylvia affiliates herself with the Labour Party against her mother's wishes, because her mother has this view of the suffrage movement that is very black and white, and Sylvia wants to bring in other elements like the red. It's all actually very clever. I like that they use all black costuming and darker costuming when the suffragette movement is at its most violent and riotous, and they use all white clothing as a contrast to that when they are trying to appeal to public sympathy. And that's clever. You would assume that black would be funereal, but I think the way that they use them is actually much more powerful. So I love that. The use of colour in this, very, very clever, and the projection design is stunning. Thank goodness we have the years displayed on the back wall using projections, otherwise we would have no idea how much time was passing, because again, we don't have a narrator to tell us. But those, I think, are all of my thoughts about Sylvia at the Old Vic. As I say this, none of the other reviews have yet come out. I am so intrigued to see what the other critics say. I encourage you to go and read other reviews, because I think a lot of people are going to respond to this in very different ways. And I do think it's really strong, and it shows a tremendous amount of creativity, and these performances are great. And like I said, I think so many people are going to love this, and I really hope that you do. I hope people go and see this and thoroughly enjoy it. If you have seen this show already, I really want to hear from you. Comment in the comment section down below what you thought. If you saw the original run way back in 2018, let us know about that as well. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to subscribe to my Stagey YouTube channel for plenty more content coming very regularly, including many more reviews. Don't forget, you can click on the links in the description to sign up to become one of my YouTube members and to sign up for a free account with ShowScore. I hope that everyone is staying safe and that you have a stagey day.
For 10 more seconds, I'm Mickey Joe Theatre. Oh my god, hey, thanks for watching, have a stagey day. Subscribe!